Good article by Mathew, speaking of Mathew Ingram. I love Mathew Ingram. Good article, I think, and I'd love to get your opinion, about the Authors Guild and the Google book scanning. This is, you know, Google started scanning kind of unilaterally ages ago. The Authors Guild said, you're stealing our stuff. They lost many times in court because, you know, here's what the here's the opinion piece on the Wall Street Journal on Monday. How Google stole the works of millions of authors. Authors Guild President Roxana Robinson writes, in 2004, Google sent its moving vans to the libraries and carted off some 20 million books.
What a sinister image.
It copied them all, including books in copyright and books not covered by copyright. It asked no authors or publishers for permission, and it offered no compensation for their use. So they sued and lost and sued again. They started in 2005. They started this process and sued again. And the thing is, in court, in 2013, the judge, Jenny Chen, ruled that Google's book scanning project met, quote, all the legal requirements for fair use. Not only did the scanning and indexing of books provide what the judge called significant public benefits, both to authors and book lovers, but Chen said all society benefits.
Yeah. Yes.
He said it is a transformational use. Reminder here, Google never makes the full contents of the book available for reading. It's snippets.
Yep. And they do. Google is doing what a library patron does. Google borrows the book. It can do whatever it wants with that book, and it gives the book back.
Well,
okay, so it records the book. It copies the book, right? That's the issue. We went through that exact same argument when it came to VCRs, right? That the act that is if somehow copying for an internal use was a copyright violation. Copyright law, I'm coming to see more and more and more. You know, Larry Lessig was right. Is an outmoded concept.
Yeah. Well, so in fact, the Authors Guild has now appealed to the Supreme Court and is hoping the Supreme Court will hear it. But the Authors Guild is somewhat, according to Mathew Ingram, changed its argument, saying lower courts have in fact distorted copyright law beyond its original meaning by overemphasizing this transformative use. Transformative use is one of 4 measures for fair use. If it's a transformative use of the original, it's considered a fair use. The court has to consider the purpose of the infringing use, the nature of the original work, the amount of the original work used, and the impact the infringement might have in the market for the original. So in the new argument, the new brief before the Supreme Court, hoping they'll take the case, they haven't yet, the Authors Guild says the Second Circuit's refusal to give real weight to any factor other than the perceived transformative purpose also contracts the approach mandated in other circuits. More fundamentally, it threatens to undermine protection of copyrighted works in a digital age to an extraordinary extent. Such a radical rewrite of copyright law should not be allowed to stand without this court's consideration. Mathew Point says this is in a sense, the lawyers for the Authors Guild dangling a carrot in front of the justices saying, now you really want to take this case because we're talking about, you know, a massive, subtle transformation of the copyright law.
Raises the stakes for them to
It's not just about us. You know, on the one hand, if the Supreme Court took this case, they could settle it once and for all, and it would help a little bit in kind of an understanding of what copyright means in the digital age.
Or you could argue that it's already been settled once and for all.
Well, it has, by circuit.
Just release it. Yeah.
2 separate court opinions. Why is he, Jeff, you're an author. Why does Margaret Atwood hate Google so much?
Yeah, I know. It's this notion of content. I was talking with somebody, a very smart guy last week who was looking into government data. And he was trying to look for the economic benefit of government data being opened. And I said, you know, to me, the way to attack this question is that in the case of government data, I know this is going to sound like it's irrelevant, but I'll get there in a second. There should never ever be a question of copyright. Number one, because information cannot be owned. And in the case of data, it's a clear case of that. Only the treatment of information can be owned. That's copyright. So there should never be a question that government has copyright on data, especially as our data. Second issue, of course, is that we've already paid for it. It's ours. There's economic benefit to it. and government should never own copyright, in my view. Now you transfer that to to what Google has done. It's not just about, Google didn't, in a sense, I would argue, copy the prose to have the prose. Google copied the data to have the data. What does mankind say in all of its books? Humankind, pardon me, say in all of its books. That's information, that's data, that's knowledge, that's worth having. There is a societal benefit, as the judge said. They didn't copy it to go read the books for free or to sell the books to others. I would say it is, in fact, indeed a different transformative use that I think does fit fair use. But authors just can't get their heads around that because and just like newspapers, just like magazines, just like TV stations, we sell content. And as long as you stay in the business of selling content, you're going to be commodified. And I think that's an outmoded business model.
Well, and also, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I'm not saying to kill books. I'm not saying to kill copyright. But is that the basis of business models going forward? I don't think so. Sorry,
I don't even think you have to be that kind of transformative about the whole thing. This is a very straightforward, in my opinion, use. It's what Google's was created to index all information, to make it available to your fingertips. They're not selling the book. They're not, right? They're not giving you the full text of the book. They're letting you search what would otherwise be a dark area, which is the context of books, so you can discover it, find it, and even in some cases buy it.
That's exactly my point. And that's what I was going to bring up, is that if you're an author, don't you want your work to be discovered? I mean, do you want to be regulated to doing book signings at bookstores? Not that bookstores are bad. Love bookstores. But you're missing out on a whole broader universe of exposure to your work. And I know that I don't know about you guys, but I have found books on Google Books through Google searches that I do, where I was looking for something very specific, and oh, by the way, there's a book, and I can tell by scanning, how they let you look at a snippet of the book. I looked at that, I'm like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to go buy this right now. I would have never found that in a bookstore. Exactly,
Aaron. And a clear lesson that I've learned in the business, whether this is news stories or books or music or whatever it is, your content is your best ad. The content itself is what draws people. Rupert Murdoch arguing that a 3-line snippet is theft, of course, we know is patently absurd. That 3-line snippet actually might be too short to effectively send audience to what you've made. So I don't think there's that much new in this case. I hope the Supreme Court doesn't take it, because I think it's settled law now. If they do, I shudder to think what they might do. There's Lawrence Lessig tried to take the extensions of copyright to the Supreme Court, and he failed there. The Supreme Court in the past has not been terribly interested in, I think, in revisiting copyright. So we'll see.
The Ngram viewer is a really good example, somebody says in the chat room, of how this is transformative. Let's do a search. You could search across books from 1800 to the year 2000. You can use multiple search, so you can see how, let's say, the Tragedy of the Commons. Tragedy. I don't know why I'm searching for that, of the Commons. Let's see how that search term being much more mentioned ever since 1964. I mean, that's a silly, what would be a good example? I don't want to...
Television.
Oh, yeah, good. Radio, newspaper, television. And see how these trends have changed. Radio peaked in 1945 when it got more than twice the number of mentions of newspapers. TV started going up then. Radio went down, but TV crossed radio.
Interesting that television didn't peak the way radio did.
Yeah. Well, not yet.
It was kind of it stays over.
Not yet. In 1978, it crossed radio, and of course, it continues to be #1 now. Newspapers, though, their peak was also in the 30s, but it's held fairly steady ever since.
Which would argue that radio was a more transformative societal.
You see, that's how an academic uses this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's really, Ngrams are really great.